So what do you mean by premise, setup, and punch? So let's look at the setup and punch first, because I'll explain what premise is. So this is an example of a punchline, right? Life is a school you never go to, but the best lessons come out of it. To learn from them, you need to pass the tests. One of the difficult tests for boys come on their six. Now you're setting up, right? You're setting up something. You're telling the audience what what school is, and what happens when you're 16, what your how your brains think. You're setting up, and then you come up with the punch, right? Usually our brains think best friends, best friends, best friends, but we wake up on our 16th birthday and suddenly our brains go, and this is the punchline: girlfriends, girlfriends, girlfriends. Now that was funny, right? That triggered some laughter. And here's another example of a punchline. You set it up. What are the chances of a 16-year-old boy getting a 16-year-old girl as a neighbor? You set up. You trigger the question, right? And then you say 50% chance, right? Because the audience are thinking something else. They don't have a right answer. But for some reason, this is funny because the question is funny. What are the chances of a 16-year-old boy getting a 16-year-old girl as a neighbor? 50% chance, right? And then when you heighten the conflict, it gets funnier. 16 and stunning, right? Now that's a better option. Now that's a 20% chance. That's another punchline there. 16 and stunning and single. Now that is building the assumption and breaking it with a punchline. No chance. So here's the setup in green and the punchline in red. Now what do I mean by premise? Premise gives you a reason, right? So it explains, clarifies certain things to the audience. So here's the premise in blue. So imagine how I would have felt when Tanya moved in as my neighbor. She was 16, stunning and single. And the icing, I learned first in O-levels, right? Now I'm giving them a reason for the next line, for the setup and the punch. Why did I say that? Because they say opposites attract. If that was true, then Tanya would have been attracted to me instantly. She was the first in the island, and the punchline, breaking the assumption, I was last in the class. Right? So out of these three, I think since this is a 40 minutes long workshop, I think this is all we can do. Let me just quickly summarize what we did today. Number one, when you find content, remember that life is a tragedy in close-up and comedy in long shot. So always look for content that has an element of tragedy in it, right? And don't be disheartened with your first draft. Don't be demotivated, because your draft just keeps getting better in time, as long as you can put your mind and heart to refining it. Just like wine, right? It keeps getting better as long as you keep refining it. Then finally, once you've refined it, make sure that you come up with the setup and punch. In some instances, premise, setup, and punchline. And also, right? Also, I think this is very important. Now, never do the mistake of dissecting your speech like I did now, right? This is good for education. But not when you're writing your speech, right? Because speeches are like human beings. They're beautiful as a whole, right? With a nice head, nose, eyes, mouth, hands, right? They're beautiful. But once you start dissecting it, right, breaking it apart, analyzing it, right, and looking at its organs, okay, the blood inside, now it becomes ugly, right? Ugly. Know the technique, but don't dissect your speeches. Learn the technique, don't dissect your speeches. Your speeches are beautiful as a whole, right? It takes time. Trust me. But it's just like learning to ride a bicycle. We fall, we get up, we learn, then we learn to ride the bicycle finally. Thank you very much.
That was awesome, Toastmaster Farweez. Thank you so much for all the tips that you gave us today. Now we will open up for questions. So if anyone has any questions to us, now is your chance. You can either unmute your mic and ask the questions directly from Toastmaster Farweez, or feel free to drop your questions into the chat as well. Hi, Toastmaster Farweez. So
Hi.
I have a question. Is it always required to give a take-home message towards an end of a humorous speech?
Right. Who am I speaking to?
I'm Rashini.
Rashini. Hi, Rashini. Right. No, it's not necessary to give a take-home message. Don't advise the audience. Don't give advices at the end of your speech. Um, you can have a take-home message, right? Something that you have learned personally, but not necessary. Not necessary. So if you look at the ballot, that is why it's very important to go through the ballot. I didn't show you the ballot because I wanted someone to ask the question. So it's good that you started with this. Okay. So here's the ballot. Let me enlarge it. Okay. So here's I think it's very important for us to go through the ballot as well. Now, if you look at the marking sheet, structure, organization, support material in speech development, effectiveness, achievement, purpose, interest, reception, ideas, logic, original thought, attentiveness, laughter, interest. So there's nothing, I mean, there is the organization, right? So that you don't have to give a message, right? So you need to find a way to end your speech. That is very important. That is crucial. You can't leave your speech hanging, right? You need to always end it with a closing. Whether you end with a message or a summary, that's totally up to you, but not necessarily a message. I hope that helps.
If anyone else has questions, now is your time.
Hi, Faris, this is Shamara. So
Hi, Sam.
basically, when you're doing the speech, so what are the limitations? Like we all are crazy, naughty people. So when you are doing the speech, what are the limitations? Like especially the humorous. So there are certain. I hope there are certain limitations. So we usually we don't talk about the sex, politics, and the certain things. So what are the certain limitations when we are doing the speech?
Right. So I think what you outlined were the general limitations, right? So that all of us all know sex, politics, and religion. But well, I have my personal limitations. I think I'll start from that, right? Because I think we need to know what our limitations are as well. I have my personal ethical and moral limitations. I don't. I make it a point not to attack any gender or any person in particular, or to laugh at someone else's cost, not to be misogynistic in your comments, right? So I think it's very important to draw that ethical and moral boundaries, and I like to keep my humor clean. You know, I try not to include cringe material, right? Like uh, I mean, double meaning humor, right? So these are my, I mean, there are people who use that. There are speakers who do that, but these are my personal limitations, right? Not to hurt anyone in my speech by attacking, maybe any particular or any community or any person, right? And also not to be not be very aware of what morality and ethics mean to me, and also not to use terms or humor that might actually make people cringe, or things that might have double meaning. Those are my personal limitations, right? So it's totally up to every individual whether you need to have those personal limitations or not as well. But I make it a point to have those limitations. I hope that helps, Chamara.
Yeah, of course, of course. Thanks, Faris.
Hi, can I go ahead?
Yeah, sure.
Hello, Farvis. I should say it was highly value adding. Farvis,
Thank
you
you.
spoke about the structure for humor, that is premise, setup, and punchline. If you can simplify or give an example for premise, please.
Yeah, sure. I think I'll give an example through an example, right?
Sure,
So
thanks.
let me once again share this script of mine. Now let's understand what premise means, right? Now premise is a reason for a conclusion. Like for example, if you say Socrates will die, right? Socrates will die. That's just a conclusion, right? That's a conclusion. Now, you need to argue why Socrates will die. Why will Socrates die? Socrates will die because Socrates is a human being and human beings die, right? Now, that's a premise, right? I hope we are clear on that. That is a premise, and from that, we lead to the conclusion. Is that clear? I'm sorry I didn't get your name once again.
Sorry, I didn't introduce myself either. I'm Pranavesh Farweez from Smedley. Yeah, it's clearer
Pranavesh.
now, Farweez.
Right. So that is premise, right? So how did I use that? How do you use that in a humor? Now, whatever is colored in blue is the premise, right? Now, it is from this premise that I build the setup, right? So without this premise, I can't have a setup, right? So look at this. Now, take this premise, take this entire blue thing out, right, Pranavesh? And then look at this. Finally, the day arrived. Bullet ran into Tanya's garden. I ran behind Bullet and pressed the doorbell. The door opened. There she was. Tanya's mother. It was like you ordered burger with fries, but they serve you roast pound with Paul Sambal. I panicked and blurted out, Auntie, Bullet ran into your garden. I think he is like you. Right? Now, without the premise, this punchline means nothing. Because here, this is what makes this funny. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
Yeah? So if you take this premise out, Pranavesh, hi, Bullet ran into your garden, I think he likes you. This won't be funny. Auntie, Bullet ran into your garden, I think he is like you. That is what a premise is. Right? Without a premise, sometimes you can't have a setup and punch. Sometimes you can have setups and punch without a premise, but sometimes you need a premise for that setup and punch. Was that clear?
Yes, Farweez, very much. And particularly thanks to Kelani and Toastmasters also for organizing this.
My pleasure.
Always, I have a question. This is Rehan. Specifically, on the last point that you made, you said it's very important not to dissect your speech. So, what you mean by that is, I hope that this is the way that I understood it. When I'm writing the speech up, to not kind of think about what the intro, body, and the conclusion is, and how to link the intro to the conclusion. So what you're proposing is to kind of just think of a story, make it funny, and then present it. Is that what you meant? Because I quite didn't understand.